next guest on FT Live. Kiley McDaniel from ESPN joining us on a very momentous day, too, for Kiley, because it is his top 100 prospects day. Kiley, great to have you on here for the first time. Big fan of your work. So do you want to announce to the world what you just unleashed for everyone today?
It's a big day because I'm finally done with it after it becoming my entire life for about 2 weeks, and my wife wondering when I was going to come to family TV time, and I kept going back into my hole to write more words. But yeah, headlined by Jackson Holiday. My top 100 is out, and I've tried to keep it fresh every year. So this year I've got tool grades for all the guys in the top 20, including a type, which is sort of like a TLDR if you don't want to read the whole scouting report, and then also reminds me of, which is like a version of a comp if there's one available, and I compared Wyatt Langford to a T-Rex in cleats, so I try to keep those fun too.
So it's not just player comps; it could be dinosaur comps.
Yeah. I won't say who, but I compared one player to a spicy bowl of gumbo that sometimes can go a little too far, but like you think it'll be good.
I like it.
AJ, this actually sounds like your kind of comps.
I like it. But he went Jackson Holiday 1, right? Jackson Churio 2, is that correct?
Yep, and then one more Jackson in the top 20, which seems like a trend people are getting a little worried about.
Too many Jacksons? If we get two more, we'll have the Jackson 5.
I'll let you get there. Yeah. Actually, on the showcase circuit, there was a guy who spelled his name Jaxxon, and then another one that was Jaxson. And so I'm really worried about the alternate spellings more than just Jackson itself.
I like it. All right, we'll move on to the major league free agents in a sec. Give us one other thing that we should look forward to when we check out the article on the top 100, something you really had fun with, or one other player that you want to point out that we should look into more that maybe isn't getting as much attention. Because obviously, as you know, I'm sure you see the other publications that have been out there for years too, and you want to kind of differentiate, but also, I'm sure you look at some of those lists and you're like, I don't see it, or vice versa, where you're like, I think they're vastly underrating this dude.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit on an island. I know before the draft when I had Wyatt Langford ahead of Dylan Cruz at 1, I couldn't find a team front office draft board to agree with me, but a lot of individual scouts agreed with me. I noticed when the other publications did that, I still have him there. I also noticed a couple things. I'll save the reveal for the article itself, but I ended up with a lot of 2023 draftees on the end of my list. I think there might be like in double digits, which has never happened before. So it's a historic draft class. A lot of guys snuck on there, and then also Ethan Salas was, I believe, a 16-year-old that was in high A last year. So I went into a lot of depth about him and some comps and how that could go and what that might look like. And then lastly, there was a player that signed 2 weeks ago, a 16-year-old that made it this year onto the list. And I think Jason Dominguez is the only other player in my time that has gone straight from signing and making the top 100 before they play a professional game.
Why? Can I ask why Langford over Dylan Cruz when Dylan Cruz was drafted higher than Wyatt Langford? And listen, I'm a Gator fan, so I'm all for Wyatt Langford.
Yeah, it's one of those things where everybody has these guys very close, back to back in some form and in the same tier and all that sort of thing. So then it comes down to not who's the best right now, because that's kind of easy. Anybody can say like, well, this guy, hit a little better against SEC. It's just like, well, we're trying to guess what he's going to do when he's 26 in the big league. So like what he did in the SEC, if it was 2% better than this guy or 2% worse, is kind of irrelevant. So I'm looking for who seems to still be scratching the surface in some ways, who seems to have made adjustments, who seems to be beating expectations, who still has tools that could, go a little further. Dylan Cruz, I've been watching him since he was 14, 15 years old and is still kind of at that tier, that same kind of player, similar kind of tools. Wyatt Langford, I didn't know his name until halfway through his sophomore year. And then he was in AAA the next year. So, and he's also a tick faster, has a tick more power, and still might be able to play center field like Dylan Cruz. So I just think there's a little more there, and all the intangibles and the makeup and the stuff you need to see to feel like he could hit that upside. I think that's all in place. So I had him first then. I was surprised he got to 4th. There was some maneuvering with money and, splitting hairs. I mean, there were teams that had Bryce Harper 3rd on their draft board behind Tyon and Machado out of high school. Like, these things are pretty fluid at the top when you have a clear top tier, because everybody kind of zeroes in on the thing they like. And that's not always the thing that the consensus best guy or the best guy in the draft necessarily has on draft day.
So Kiley, I'm going to take us to the free agent market. Okay. And actually let's get a shot of Brock and AJ and their reaction to what I'm about to bring up. And Kiley, you can help me out here because I don't know if these guys know yet. So I'm going to do some bragging for you, okay? Because you put out contract projections, your estimate, and obviously you're not going to get every, player on the dot. There's 150-ish free agents or whatever the number is that you put together. But do you want to give us a little synopsis of some of the players that you completely accurately put to the year and the dollar? Like I'm seeing Jordan Hicks as one. Reese Hoskins is another that the exact years and money was given by the world or given to the world by Kiley McDaniel. About a month or two before it happened?
Yeah, now I'm pulling up my spreadsheet to see what the exact ones were. But yeah, there were Harrison Bader. I got exactly. I think there's like
Nice.
5 or 6 that I got exactly, all like 10 million plus, and I usually don't get more than like one or two. So I actually got a text from Jeff Passan because he mentioned it in one of his articles last week before I noticed it. And he was like, "You did really good." And I'm like, I don't want to make it seem like I knew these were going to happen, but I've also been doing this for like 5 years, so maybe I'm getting better at it. There is a bit of like a math that goes into it, but I have the most trouble with the guys that are 7,500 million and up, because sometimes a market just collapses, you don't see it coming, and what you thought was going to be 5 for 150 turns out to be a convoluted 3 for 90 with 2 opt outs and all that nonsense. Like just guessing like the structure is hard enough, much less the money. But when you get down into that 1, 2, 3 years, you look at the comps from the last 2 years, there were 3 guys like this guy. Like it gets a little bit easier. And then, rather than missing by 1 year, 1 million, I happen to get him this year. So I don't want to toot my own horn that much because that means I'm going to be terrible next year.
Well, Kylie, I heard that agents and front offices are starting to look at your predictions, and that's where they're coming up with these numbers. Because you're so spot on. I want to know, did you guess 700 million for Shohei Ohtani?
I did not. Although I did guess, I think it was, I guess 520, and I think the like NPV projection was like high 400. So I was like closer than I thought I was going to be when I saw 700, and I was like, oh no, I missed by almost 200 million. That's pretty bad. And then you see the translation, and you're like, okay, I was like, I was in the area. And there were a couple like Yamamoto that after I put out 212, and then as he was getting close to signing, I'm like, I think it's going to be more like 250, 270, and then he gets 325, and I was like, okay, I was, my last guess before that one happened was closer. But the high ones are so difficult because, like when Bogarts gets 10 years last year, it's like I wasn't projecting he'd get 10. So if you miss 3 years, you're automatically off by like 50 million. And it like kind of looks ridiculous.
Well, I don't think anybody expected Bogarts to get as many years as he got. I think that's why he ended up in San Diego, because they were like, oh shit, yeah, I guess we got to take this deal, right?
Yeah, no, it only takes one bidder to land a player is always difficult when like there's some players like Aaron Nola that you kind of hear after the fact, like these were the other offers, and you're like, oh, there were like 3 teams in at the same number, and then this team went 1 extra year and got him, and it's very clear that it's like an efficient market where one team tops the other ones. And I've had some agents in the past couple of years tell me like in confidence that like, oh, this team offered this, it was like 15 million more than anyone else offered, don't tell anyone else that. And you're like, oh, it's not always a super efficient market. Like every now and then somebody just like wildly overpays and they're the only ones in the market and they don't know. Which I guess naturally leads us into Scott Boris's 4 guys that are still in the market. And I'm not exactly sure how that's going to play out or what the sort of leverage is. But I mean, we've seen like with Bellinger and with Montgomery that some of these guys are like, oh, they got 3 spots. And then the 2 other of the 3 spots, like sign a player that takes that guy's spot and spends the money that could have gone to him. And you're like, he's kind of got like 1 spot left. Like, how's Scott going to play this one?
Agreed. Have you seen Eric Kratz on our show, Kylie? Do you know Eric Kratz?
Yeah, I've seen some of the clips. Yeah.
He also does the free agent contest. So next time we have you on and we have him on, I want you guys to take your spreadsheets and put them up against each other. Now, listen, I'm assuming you get paid a lot more than Kratz does to do his. So I called him a super nerd because he literally went through every player, and he'd say, well, I had Reese Hoskins getting 2 years, 37.9. And this is because of my projection. So I understand, but I want to put your spreadsheet up against Kratz's and see who did better.
Hoskins actually 2 for 34 is one of the ones I got. But AJ, I have to take a step back here. Was it my face that told you I was doing all this in a spreadsheet? How did you know that?
Well, because you said it. You said I had to check my spreadsheet.
Oh, sorry, I gave it away. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know how to do a spreadsheet. How do you even do a spreadsheet?
It's just like a bunch of squares in a grid, and then you get kind of more complicated as you go. I actually am a little bit renowned in ESPN that when somebody sends me a sheet of like something we're working on, it just has like 7. I'll go in there and reformat it and do the freeze the cells and all the annoying stuff. But I can't read it if it's not formatted correctly. So I guess I'm going to out myself as a Google Sheets formatting nerd.
All right.
Hey, Kylie, question for you: the most relevant news of the day. Do you see how Baltimore is going to be fortunate enough to have an owner that's going to invest in the team? And how do you think that is going to change not just what we see from the Orioles, but especially what we see from them in the free agent market, because this offseason is a time that a normal team in their winning window would have kind of popped off. And of course, they've done nothing besides get Craig Kimbrell to fill somewhat the Felix Bautista role, and that's it.
Yeah, I'm under the impression that Angelos will still have controlling interest until he passes away, and then the guys that are getting a minority stake will then take over full time. So I would imagine there won't be like an immediate like the rest of this winter or next winter they'll go nuts. But I imagine at some point having an independently wealthy private equity guys owning the team, having Mike Elias in place, who was probably the GM that like if any random private equity guy buys a team and can pick any GM, that's probably the one they pick, either him or Andrew Friedman. So I would imagine they're copacetic enough on the approach that you would imagine they would do what Oakland is saying they're going to do. I'm not sure anyone really believes them. They're like, oh, we are at least a league average level market. We should have a league average payroll. We'll do it in our own way and maybe in our own time, but we'll get to the point where we are competitive in terms of money. And I know from when AJ was in Atlanta last year was my first year there. There's a lot of discussions we had with that really good farm system where it was like one of the like hidden benefits of having a really good AA and AAA set of prospects is when they come up, hopefully they're good and all these sorts of things. But if like 7 or 8 of them are all really good at the same time, that means you can spend like 25 million on like 3 guys because you're not spending any money on the guys you have, which is exactly the spot Baltimore's in right now. Like you could say reasonably if it wasn't, the wrong position, like Trey Turner last winter would have been a perfect guy because it's like, well, he can come in and play shortstop or second or center. And we just think he's going to be a good player. And we need like one more hitter, and like spending 30 million on one guy when almost the whole team is at the league minimum or early in arbitration is like actually not irresponsible, even though 300 million for a team that wasn't in first place seemed crazy. Like now in retrospect, that would have been like a really good move. And he really could fit the team if he was sort of on board with, I want to be on the East Coast. I don't mind if I play any one of these 3 positions, like, that kind of thing. Like it actually would have fit, even though that sounds kind of silly. And I remember a conversation I got into with the GM where he was talking to me off the record about like a free agent signing he made. And he was like, yeah, we didn't have the money to do this. And I was like, no, you did. And he was like, no, we didn't. And I was like, no. Like you could have given that guy 25 million. Maybe you were told you can't spend that much, but you could trade a guy and you could get that guy. Like you could afford almost anyone. Tampa Bay can afford to pay $30 million a year for somebody. Like, you can kind of make it happen if you want to. You just decided you can't afford him because all of the sort of assumptions leading up to that you had decided were sort of set. And I think with Baltimore, I think a lot of times we just skip to past all the assumptions that they've clearly already made instead of like, no, they should be, spending a lot of money and getting a lot better. And it seems very obvious now that this is like the time to be doing that. And hopefully that'll be what happens soon.
Yeah, Kiley, I got some more questions about the free agent market. I think you said we started out with about 150 free agents. I think now we're probably down to 130 left because no one's signing anywhere, it seems like.
Yep.
Who's your favorite guy still out there? Who's your favorite guy still out there, and where do you think, or where would you like to see him go? And what, I'm curious because to me, I'm like, what's taking so long? How is a 2-time Cy Young winner and Blake Snell still out there on the market, and Jordan Montgomery and a Cody Bellinger? Like, who's your guy, and where do you see him ending up?
From the bigger money guys, I would say Montgomery, just because he seems like a lock to be good for the next couple of years, where he can start playoff games for you as a top 3 starter, that kind of thing. And then like you're not positive because this guy has huge stuff. Maybe it won't age that well on the back end, but a playoff team. I know there were some rumors that like Philly was on him early, and then they ended up signing Nola. I think Texas is where he lands. He was one of the guys I was referring to, where the Yankees were kind of looking at him, and then they ended up adding Stroman, and San Francisco was kind of looking at him, and then they've brought in some pitching, and so I kind of assume Texas is the spot he's going to land. I think these owners and GMs are getting kind of hip to what Boris is doing, and they realize if he only has one spot, he can't hold you hostage. So he's the guy that I would feel good about because for the big money contending teams, he's exactly what they need for the next couple of years, and then they'll figure out the other parts later, and he'll probably be fine on the back end of that deal. And then for the lower money guys, I think Michael Lorenzen is really interesting. I'm not. Wouldn't have the team in front of me that like makes a ton of sense. Like even going back to a team like Detroit, where they just need some reliable innings because he's such a later bloomer that barely even started in college, was a 2-way guy, can really hit, great athlete. I think there's a little more in there, and for usually when you sign that kind of guy, whether it's Kenta Maeda or Seth Lugo, you're kind of paying like above retail to just get, you're hoping 150 innings. You might only get 110. And with Lorenzen, like we still don't really know what he is, even though given how long he's been in the big leagues, you think this guy's like a finished product. But like there could be 150 innings and 10 wins and a 350 ERA, and this guy's a real starter. Like that's still on the board with him. And the way for most guys his age, it's almost like, can he keep it together for a year or two? Whereas Lorenzen, you're still kind of going in that direction. And I would imagine the terms aren't going to be much more than a year or two, or 10 or 12 a year. Like I think it's a pretty reasonable number.
Okay, so Kylie, let me get that same perspective on the team side of things. One team or more that you've really liked in terms of what they've done this offseason, and then on the other end, a team where you're like, either you don't like what they've done or you feel like there's a huge incomplete next to them. And obviously, I would say steer away from the A's type of teams where we know they're not doing anything.
Or the Dodgers.
Or the Dodgers. I feel like, right, that no easy answers, please.
Yeah, I would say the Yankees have been interesting because going into the offseason, I think I'd written a couple of times, like they were in a tough spot where like Cash was lashing out at reporters. They had their worst season in a long time. He's been there a really long time. Are they going to be able to like really go back to where they're supposed to be this year? If they don't this year, like there might be like crisis, we got to solve it kind of stuff rather than just like, it was a bad year, we'd like to do better. So I think getting Soto, trading pitching depth, which is one of the things they're best at creating in baseball, but you still have Will Warren and Chase Hampton as potential options in the big leagues this year. And then adding Stroman when his market was lower than I think it should have been. I think he fits exactly what they need. So I like how they kind of put that together. And then you also, the weakness that I think I see is there's not really a true center fielder. You don't want to stretch Aaron Judge and make him play center field. But then you have Trent Grisham there. You have Jason Dominguez coming back in the second half. Like I think if they can keep everybody healthy through the first half, they got a chance to be like one of the best teams in baseball on paper. And this is like a year where they really need that.
Is there a dog? Is there someone breaking into your house?
Sounds like we have delivery coming in now, and they're right above me.
I was like, is there an intruder? Kylie, do you have to go?
Seriously.
I know. I was
get tired after a while.
I was trying to hear out of this here, but also hear is that my dog, or am I hearing my dogs, or is that someone else's dog? I was getting a little confused over here.
Now they've stopped. I guess the delivery guy's gone.
So those weren't your dogs.
No, those are my dogs. They are right above me right now. That's why you can hear them with the door closed.
Oh. We were together in Atlanta.
Yeah, I wasn't down in the clubhouse that year because it was my first season. I was mostly going to the draft international and the minor league affiliates. So you probably didn't see me around.
Okay, good. Because we just had Rowdy on. He said I didn't know my teammates. So I was like, man, I really don't know my teammates.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'm in the big league clubhouse more now when I go get quotes for a story than I was when I actually worked there.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you for making me feel better because I was going to say. So wait, were you a part of the whole team that signed all those illegal players and did all that? Was that you, Kylie, or was?
Oh wait, you weren't high enough on the office when that happened, but as assistant director of assisting people, I wasn't included in making the decisions.
Okay.
Hey, with the Braves, though, what do you think of where the Braves are at right now? I mean, obviously, Anthopoulos just got himself signed to a monster long-ass deal. Where do you think they're at from a franchise perspective? Obviously, the Dodgers have dominated the offseason conversation, but there are quite a few people that think the Braves still have a better ball club from top to bottom. But what have you observed, obviously being a part of the team back in the past and seeing the way that they've kind of got this consistent winning product going right now?
Yeah, there's I've noticed a lot of, especially, like Mets or Phillies fans that, talk about the competition with the Braves, especially during the regular season, is, they got like this whole team where the, guys that are 23 to 25 sign forever. Like, how do we compete with this? And then the Phillies fans said that a little bit less after they beat them twice in the playoffs. But there's also like a hidden downside to that if something bad happens or a guy just isn't the guy he's been in the past, all of a sudden they're locked into all these contracts. And if you go look at like their roster resource page, like they're like right on or just over the first cut of the CBT. And it's not clear that they're going to be one of those teams that goes to 250, 260, 270. And every year their payroll goes up because all these guys are getting raises $3 or $4 million a year. And there's like 15 of them that have like guaranteed money of some sort, or they're in arbitration or going up every year. So it's like all of a sudden this thing becomes not super sustainable. And if all of these guys are all-stars and borderline all-stars, then it can work. And if a couple of these guys aren't, all of a sudden it becomes a little risky because I don't think the money is going to be there. And now you have, Dansby Swanson and Freddie Freeman just left. Max Fried is up next year. Chris Sale is, on the older side. He's probably not going to be that guy 4 years from now. Like now they kind of need the farm system to get this second tier of guys coming out. And I'm not sure those guys are there. It's a lot of guys in low A, high school guys coming off of surgery, guys that were lower picks that have had one good season, and you kind of hope they can turn into that guy. But they're not quite there yet. You have Ian Anderson coming off of Tommy John. So, I mean, they're in a great spot. Obviously, they have all the pieces to make that move and win those series and get to the World Series again. But there is a little bit of a risk that if things don't keep going to plan the way they have been, that seems like perfectly planned out, that everyone's in place. There's a downside people aren't talking about if things don't go exactly to plan.
Okay, that's actually interesting perspective. I like that. Obviously, the easy one to point to is how much would Ronald Acuna be getting if he was going year to year? Like, I don't know where he would have been at, but he would have probably been close to free agency at this point, right?
Yeah, and Albies, and you could argue Riley's price at an extension would be higher now, and Michael Harris would be getting into ARB. Like, there's a lot of guys that if you just went year to year and tried to play it really safe, like a lot of these sort of process-oriented teams have, you'd be talking about an extra 30 or 40 million that they're saving because they acted quickly and they got the right guys. So yeah, no, they're certainly in a good spot right now, and I think with Strider and Sale and Morton, like I think they're lined up to where that starting pitching depth and sort of the back end of the bullpen to shorten the games. Like I think it's all there. It's also been like a bit of an odd offseason where it's just been like a lot of trades and like moving contracts around and not necessarily players, and all the depth guys are getting moved around. Like it's been kind of hard at this point to look back and be like, oh, the plan was they were going to do this. It just seems like they keep finding little edges they can take advantage of and keep adding on them. And it seems like they thought the free agent market was a little expensive. Then acquiring a guy like, Jared Kelnick for a team that didn't have money to spend, that was a little cheaper, which I'm not positive that ahead of time. But I guess as you start price checking everybody, you can kind of slowly figure out where the market is and kind of make those decisions. And almost no other team has like taken that approach. So maybe there was some value in zigging rather than zagging.
Yeah, I like
Riley,
it.
Did your dogs get a hold of somebody? Because there was a lot
No,
of
that was me, AJ.
We're struggling, man.
That was me. I got too excited and knocked my light down. I'm still kind of not over what's going on in Baltimore right now, how everything's going to change. So it's kind of been screwing up my day in a positive way. I'm very excited about the sale process that's going on right now.
Well, yeah. What do you think's going to happen? What do you think the timeline is for them, spending $150 million on a payroll?
I actually need some more context on this because the way that we were talking about it earlier, I thought that the new ownership group is getting 40% right off the jump so that they're actually majority owners right away. As soon as this gets approved, which could be next week at the owners meetings that are down in Orlando. So I'm actually looking at it as these guys taking over right from the jump, and then they get the full 70% that they're buying from the Angelos family eventually, unfortunately, after Peter Angelos passes away for tax purposes. So I actually think they're going to take over pretty quickly. I don't know if it's going to be this offseason that they can just jump in and say, hey, Blake Snell. But many other fans are hoping that's the case. I do think that it's going to happen from what I'm reading, like in the next few months that they take over. So if that's the case, that's a completely different looking ball club. I mean, even if you're looking at the trade deadline at the least or the next offseason, this is a team that's in their winning window now. And as we all know, winning windows often happen earlier than expected and they leave earlier than expected. And they're in the AL East. So as good as they look right now, things change quickly. I can see them coming in, wanting to make a statement really quickly and throwing some pretty nice looking contract extension offers at, of course, Adley and Gunnar, but maybe others too, Grayson Rodriguez and some of the other young position players, whichever ones they like the best. And then adding some substance to that because, dude, their payroll is $70 million right now.
Yeah.
I mean, if they even it's always the bottom few. Even if they get to a point where they're like 18 to 20 in the bigs, that puts them at like 130? I mean, we were talking earlier that they could have this offseason, if they were spending like that, gotten Snell and Hader easily and then still done more and not gotten to that point.
And still be in the bottom half. I know when Texas spent all that money on Semien and Seager and John Gray all at once, everyone's like, oh, what are they going to spend, $250? It's like, no, they were still like an average payroll at that point. They had like a lot of room. You can get like 3 all-stars and not like jump up tiers that much, just jump up like within your tier. And they're still at like the bottom of the bottom tier. You can just get to like the respectable area and add a couple all-stars, which like seems kind of silly that they were that far down. But I think that's also like part of the approach with what Elias did and what was done in Houston and just the general approach is like, you got to look at the value of like dollar per WAR, and like if we don't think that the guy we're signing in free agency is going to return a value, or he's just going to give it to you in year one, so we got to give him 3 bad years at the end of his deal. They're not looking to do that. So I that's why I was saying earlier, like I wonder what their approach will be when they're given money, because I don't think he's one of those guys that you just give him like an extra 70 mil in this year's budget and he just goes and signs 3 all-stars to like 8-year deals. Like I think he'd do it differently. And even with like Andrew Friedman in LA, like you think of him now as the guy giving out the big deals, but like he let Greinke go, he let Turner go, like he let most of Machado, he let most of those guys go. And then with Freeman and Betts and Yamamoto and Ohtani started handing out those deals, but for a long time he didn't do it. And we saw in San Francisco with Farhan Zaidi that they also didn't hand out those big deals, even though they tried to a couple times and tried to do those 1 and 2 year deals and patch together. And then this year they did it with Lee. Like I think that's kind of the prevailing theory: is you don't go 0 to 100 immediately. In part because you don't have experience in that area and you want to like wait for the right spot to do it. And I kind of assume that's the way they would do it. But even just doing that piecemeal, let's spend 3 for 30 here and 2 for 20 here and whatever, like that would be more than they're spending right now.
Yeah, I mean, they've never given out a multi-year contract during this Mike Elias tenure, and it's not because of Mike, it's because of ownership. So yeah, that's why I'm super pumped for Baltimore. Whenever that happens, yeah, I agree with you. I think they'll probably ease into it, and I think they'll probably favor their own young talent on the extension side of things more so than going nuts in free agency. But I mean, the bar is so freaking low right now in terms of what they could do. So it's pretty exciting. It's big times in Baltimore. That was huge news. Kiley, great catching up with you, man. Congratulations on the top 100 being past you, so you can have some more fam time. Tell the dogs we said what up, and thanks for joining us.
Yep, and stay tuned. We'll have the farm rankings on Friday, the team list coming up, and then I'll get into draft season and a lot of high school and college stuff. So the work never ends, but it gets a little bit easier after this point. This was the hard part.
Exactly. You made it, dude. Well, and everyone check out Kiley's work on ESPN Plus. You can check out the top 100, and also we'll post his Twitter on our Twitter, so you can check out some of his work there too and follow him. Thanks, Kiley. Good talking to you, man.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Great seeing you again, Kiley.
Thanks, Kiley.
Thanks.